The distant howls echoed across the Montana plains, as Zara Lockhart realized with mounting horror that daylight was fading much faster than she had anticipated. Her horse had gone lame 3 miles back, forcing her to continue on foot through unfamiliar territory. And now the cooling October air of 1879 carried the unmistakable sound of predators. Zara clutched her thin shawl tighter around her shoulders, cursing her decision to take the shortcut back to town after visiting her ailing aunt. At 22, she'd grown up in these territories and should have known better than to travel alone so close to dusk. The promise she'd made to return to her position at the general store by morning now seemed foolishly trivial as another howl, closer this time, sent shivers down her spine. The rolling hills of tall grass provided little shelter, and as she quickened her pace, the heel of her boot caught on a hidden rock. She tumbled forward, her palms scraping against the hard ground, the small bundle of medicines and food she'd been carrying scattered across the dirt. Zara scrambled to gather the precious items, her aunt's lifeline until the doctor could make his monthly visit. When she looked up, her blood ran cold. Not 20 yards away, the unmistakable silhouette of a wolf stood watching her, its eyes reflecting the dying light. Another appeared to its right, then a third. They were thin, the drought had made game scarce, and Zara suddenly understood with terrible clarity that she represented an opportunity for the starving pack. She backed away slowly, her hand instinctively reaching for the small knife tucked in her boot. It was a pitiful defense against multiple predators, but she wouldn't go down without a fight. The wolves advanced, spreading out in a semicircle that effectively cut off her escape route toward town. Zara's back pressed against a large boulder, the only significant feature in the otherwise open grassland. The lead wolf lowered its head, muscles tensing in preparation to lunge. The crack of a rifle shot split the air. The wolves scattered momentarily, startled by the unexpected sound. Zara whipped her head toward the source of the gunshot. Silhouetted against the crimson sky was the unmistakable figure of a rider, rifle raised skyward. "Don't move." A deep voice commanded as the man urged his horse forward, firing another warning shot that sent the wolves retreating further, not gone, but hesitating. He approached quickly, the powerful strides of his chestnut horse eating up the distance between them. As he drew closer, Zara could make out his features. Broad shoulders under a worn leather vest, a face partially obscured by several days' worth of stubble, and eyes sharp with alertness as they scanned the perimeter. "Get on," he said, extending a gloved hand toward her without dismounting. "They'll be back any minute." Zara hesitated only briefly before grasping his forearm. With surprising strength, he pulled her up behind him in one fluid motion. "Hold on tight," he instructed, and Zara had barely wrapped her arms around his waist when the horse lurched forward, powerful muscles propelling them away from the danger. She glanced back to see the wolf pack had regrouped and was now following at a distance, their gray forms flowing like shadows through the tall grass. "My things," she began. "Leave them," he cut her off. "Your life's worth more than whatever's in that bundle." They rode hard for nearly 20 minutes, the wolves eventually giving up the chase as the distance increased. Only then did the stranger slow his horse to a more sustainable pace. "Thank you," Zara said, her voice shaky with leftover adrenaline. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come along." "You'd have been dinner," he replied matter-of-factly. "What in God's name were you doing out here alone at this hour?" The bluntness of his assessment stung, but Zara couldn't deny its accuracy. "I was returning from my aunt's homestead. My horse went lame a few miles back," he grunted in response. "Name's Zachary Flynn. Most folks call me Zach." "Zara Lockhart," she replied, suddenly aware of how tightly she was still holding on to him. She loosened her grip slightly but didn't let go. The warmth of his body was a welcome contrast to the rapidly cooling night air. "Well, Miss Lockhart, my camp's about a mile ahead. You can rest there tonight and I'll take you to town in the morning." "I'm expected back tonight," she protested weakly, knowing it was a futile argument. Zach glanced over his shoulder, one eyebrow raised. "By all means, I'd be happy to leave you here if you'd prefer to continue on foot in the dark." Zara pressed her lips together in frustration but remained silent. The man was insufferable, but he had saved her life. As promised, within minutes a small campsite came into view, nestled in a protective circle of cottonwood trees near a shallow creek. A small fire burned low, and a simple canvas tent was pitched nearby. Zach dismounted with easy grace, then offered his hand to help her down. Zara ignored it, sliding from the horse on her own, though her legs trembled slightly as they touched the ground. "Suit yourself," he muttered, leading his horse to the picket line where another horse, a dappled gray, was already tethered. Zara took stock of the campsite. It was orderly and practical, clearly the setup of someone accustomed to life on the trail. "Are you a bounty hunter?" she asked, noting the wanted posters partially visible from his saddlebag. "Sometimes," he replied, removing the saddle from his horse, "when the money's good. Mostly I scout for the railroad companies. They pay me to map routes and assess terrain." He gestured toward the fire. "Make yourself comfortable. There's coffee in the pot and some stew left if you're hungry." Zara's stomach growled at the mention of food. She'd shared her own provisions with her aunt, leaving nothing for her return journey. Reluctantly, she approached the fire and ladled a portion of the savory-smelling stew into a tin cup he'd provided. "Why were you out there?" she asked between cautious bites. "There's nothing in that direction, except my aunt's homestead for miles." Zach settled on the opposite side of the fire, the flames casting shadows across his face that made him look both younger and older simultaneously. Up close, she guessed him to be around 30, with lines at the corners of his eyes that spoke of long days in the sun. "Following a stream that might be useful for the railroad," he explained. "Then I heard wolves and figured some poor fool might be in trouble." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Turns out I was right. I'm not a fool," Zara snapped. "My horse went lame. It could happen to anyone." "Anyone should know better than to travel alone without proper supplies or a weapon," he countered. "These territories don't forgive carelessness, Miss Lockhart." Zara set down her empty cup with more force than necessary. "I had no choice. My aunt is ill and I'm all she has left. The doctor only comes through once a month." Something in Zach's expression softened slightly. "Your parents?" "Dead. Fever took them 3 years ago." Zara looked away, uncomfortable with the sudden personal turn of the conversation. "My aunt raised me after we moved west when I was a child. She's the only family I have left." Zach nodded, seemingly satisfied with her explanation. "Get some rest," he said, pointing to the tent. "You can take the tent. I'll sleep by the fire." "I couldn't, it wasn't an offer," he interrupted. "You've had a rough day and will need to leave early if you're so determined to get back to town." Too exhausted to argue further, Zara retreated to the small canvas tent. Inside, a bedroll had been laid out, surprisingly neat for a man who lived on the trail. She removed only her boots before lying down, pulling the rough wool blanket over her shoulders. Despite her exhaustion, sleep came fitfully. Every distant howl jerked her awake, her heart pounding as the memory of those hungry eyes flashed through her mind. Sometime in the deepest part of the night, she gave up and pushed aside the tent flap. Zach sat against a tree trunk, his rifle across his lap, staring into the dying embers of the fire. He looked up as she emerged. "Wolves still bothering you?" he asked softly. "How did you know?" he shrugged. "Not my first encounter with them. Takes a while for the fear to fade." Zara sat nearby, drawing her knees to her chest. "Do you ever get used to it? The danger, I mean." "You don't get used to it," Zach replied, adding a small log to the fire. "You just learn to live alongside it. That's the reality of the frontier." They sat in companionable silence as the fire crackled back to life. "My aunt says the frontier is no place for a woman alone," Zara said eventually. "She wants me to marry Henry Wilcox, the banker's son." Zach's mouth quirked slightly. "And do you want to marry the banker's son?" Zara snorted inelegantly. "Henry Wilcox counts his coins before bed and calls it excitement. I'd rather face those wolves again." A genuine laugh escaped Zach, transforming his face completely. The stern lines disappeared, replaced by crinkles around his eyes that spoke of a man who perhaps once had laughed more freely. "What about you?" Zara found herself asking. "No Mrs. Flynn waiting somewhere?" His expression shuddered immediately. "There was, she's gone now." The abrupt change in his demeanor told Zara not to press further. "I'm sorry," she said simply. He nodded once, acknowledging her sympathy without inviting more conversation. They fell back into silence, but it was different now, weighted with unasked questions. When dawn broke, they worked efficiently to break camp. Zach showed Zara how to properly extinguish the fire while he packed the tent and cooking gear. Within an hour, they were mounted and heading toward town. The ride was mostly silent, but not uncomfortably so. Occasionally, Zach would point out landmarks or explain how to identify signs of water in the seemingly barren landscape. Zara found herself absorbing his words, filing away knowledge that might someday save her life. As the small frontier town of Riverspend came into view, Zara felt an unexpected reluctance to return. The town represented safety, yes, but also the confining expectations that awaited her, the general store job she tolerated, her aunt's increasing pressure to secure a respectable future with Henry, the smallness of a life already mapped out for her. Which way? Zach asked as they approached the town limits. The general store, Zara directed him. I work there for Mr. Peterson. As they rode down the main street, Zara was acutely aware of the curious stares from townsfolk. A woman returning at morning, riding double with a rough-looking stranger, would fuel gossip for weeks. Outside the general store, Zach dismounted first, then helped Zara down despite her previous display of independence. This time, she accepted his assistance, her hand lingering in his a moment longer than necessary. Thank you, Mr. Flynn, she said formally, conscious of the onlookers. You saved my life. Just Zach, he corrected, and anyone would have done the same. We both know that's not true. Zara hesitated, then asked, will you be staying in town long? Something flickered across his face, regret perhaps. Just long enough to resupply. The railroad doesn't pay me to dawdle. Before Zara could respond, the store door opened, and Mr. Peterson emerged, his expression a mixture of relief and disapproval. Miss Lockhart, we were beginning to worry. Your aunt sent word that you'd left yesterday morning. My horse went lame, Zara explained. Mr. Flynn rescued me from a wolf pack and kindly provided shelter for the night. Mr. Peterson eyed Zach suspiciously. Well, that was fortunate. Your reputation, however, is intact, Zach interrupted coldly. Miss Lockhart was in danger and I assisted her, nothing more. The storekeeper had the decency to look embarrassed. Of course, we're grateful, naturally. If you need supplies, we'd be happy to offer a discount in appreciation. Zach nodded curtly and turned to Zara. Take care, Miss Lockhart. Perhaps invest in a more reliable horse. With that, he led his two horses toward the livery stable, leaving Zara standing in front of the store, feeling strangely bereft. The next 2 weeks passed with excruciating slowness. Zara fell back into her routine, organizing inventory, serving customers, and spending her evenings listening to her aunt extol the virtues of Henry Wilcox. But something had changed. The life that had once seemed merely constraining now felt unbearable. Each day she found herself watching the road, hoping for a glimpse of a chestnut horse and its rider. But Zach Flynn had disappeared as suddenly as he had appeared, leaving only whispered gossip in his wake. Did you hear? Mrs. Timmons asked as Zara measured out flour for her. That man who brought you back, they say, he tracked down the Blackwater gang single-handed last spring, brought in all 3, dead or alive. I heard he was mixed up with them, countered Mr. Harris, leaning on the counter. Outlaw turned bounty hunter, can't trust that sort. Zara kept her expression neutral as she tied the flour sack. 15 cents, Mrs. Timmons. Will there be anything else? At night, she dreamed of wolves and open skies and a man whose rare smile transformed his entire face. She woke feeling more alive than she had in years, only to face another day of measured existence. It was on the 15th day since her rescue that everything changed again. Zara was closing the store when the door opened, bringing with it a blast of autumn air and the tall figure of Zachary Flynn. Her heart stuttered in her chest. You're back. He looked different, freshly shaven, his clothes less trail-worn. His eyes, though, were the same observant, cautious, revealing little. Just passing through, he said, removing his hat. Thought I'd check if you'd gotten yourself cornered by any more wolf packs. Despite herself, Zara smiled. Not recently, though Mr. Peterson's cat did give me a nasty scratch yesterday. A hint of a smile tugged at Zach's mouth. Dangerous territory, general stores. What brings you back to Riverspend? She asked, trying to sound casual as she continued her closing duties. Zach watched her move about the store. Finished my scouting job. The railroad has what they need for now. So you're heading out again. Zara couldn't keep the disappointment from her voice. Actually, he hesitated, uncharacteristically uncertain. I was thinking of staying a while. Sheriff mentioned he could use a deputy, with winter coming and trouble brewing over land boundaries. Zara nearly dropped the jar she was holding. You're staying, as a deputy, he shrugged, seemingly embarrassed by her surprise. Might be nice to sleep under the same roof for more than a night or two. Besides, the wolves around here clearly need watching. Their eyes met, and Zara understood he wasn't talking about four-legged predators. Deputy Flynn, she tested the title. It has a certain respectability to it. Does that matter to you? Respectability? He asked the question lightly, but Zara sensed its importance. Not as much as my aunt might wish, she admitted. I care more about a person's actions than their title. Zach nodded, apparently satisfied with her answer. In that case, Miss Lockhart, would you allow me to escort you home this evening, to protect you from cats and other dangerous creatures? For the first time in weeks, Zara laughed freely. I would appreciate that very much, Mr. Flynn. As autumn deepened into winter, Zach settled into his role as deputy with surprising ease. The townsfolk, initially wary of the former bounty hunter, gradually warmed to him as he proved both fair and effective. Zara watched with quiet pride as he earned the community's respect, though she pretended not to notice the speculative glances that followed whenever they were seen together. Their courtship, for that was what it had become, progressed with deliberate caution. Zach escorted her home most evenings, sometimes joining Zara and her aunt for dinner. Aunt Martha, despite her initial misgivings about Zach's background, couldn't deny his positive influence on her niece or his growing status in town. He's rough around the edges, she confided to Zara one evening after Zach had left, but there's goodness in him, and he looks at you like you hung the moon. Zara blushed but couldn't deny the observation. The man who had once been so taciturn now sought out her company daily, sharing stories of his travels and listening intently to her own modest dreams. It was during a December snowfall that Zach finally told her about his wife. They were walking back from the town's Christmas social, snowflakes catching in Zara's hair as she held tightly to Zach's arm. Her name was Rebecca, he said without preamble. We were childhood sweethearts in Missouri, married at 19 and headed west with big dreams. Zara remained silent, sensing the importance of letting him continue at his own pace. She died in childbirth our second year out here, the baby too. His voice was flat, containing years of carefully controlled grief. I couldn't stay in the cabin after that. Started taking whatever jobs would keep me moving. Zara squeezed his arm gently. I'm so sorry, Zach. He covered her hand with his. For 5 years I've been running, not just from place to place, but from feeling anything at all, until that evening when I saw a woman cornered by wolves. They had stopped walking, standing together as snow gathered on their shoulders and hats. Zach turned to face her, his eyes more open and vulnerable than she'd ever seen them. I didn't just save you that night, Zara. In some way I don't fully understand, you saved me too. Zara reached up, brushing snowflakes from his beard. We saved each other then. His kiss was gentle and questioning at first, then deepened as she responded with all the emotion she'd been containing for months. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Zara noticed several curtains hastily closing in nearby houses. Well, she laughed softly, that should give everyone something to talk about tomorrow. Zach grinned, looking years younger. Good, let me give them something else. He took her hand and dropped to one knee in the gathering snow, his expression suddenly serious. Zara Lockhart, I never expected to find love again. I never thought I deserved it. But if you'll have me, I promise to spend every day proving worthy of you. Tears welled in Zara's eyes, turning the falling snow into a glittering blur. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes. He rose and swept her into his arms, spinning her around as snow swirled around them like stars. Their wedding in early spring was a town-wide celebration. Even Henry Wilcox attended, though he spent most of the reception looking glumly into his punch cup. Aunt Martha, whose health had improved considerably over the winter, beamed with pride as she watched Zara and Zach exchange vows in the small church. "Never seen a more handsome deputy," she declared later, patting Zach's cheek affectionately. "Or a happier bride," she added, embracing Zara. Life as Mrs. Flynn brought changes Zara couldn't have imagined 6 months earlier. She and Zach moved into a small house at the edge of town close enough for him to perform his duties as deputy, but with views of the open prairie she had come to appreciate during their courtship. On clear evenings, they often sat on their porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in the same colors as the evening they first met. Zara continued working at the general store, though now as a partner rather than an employee. Mr. Peterson, impressed by her business acumen and eager to spend more time with his grandchildren, had offered her partial ownership an arrangement that allowed her independence while still providing time to create a home with Zach. Their happiness, however, was not without challenges. In the summer following their wedding, a drought worse than any in recent memory gripped the region. Crops failed, livestock suffered, and tensions rose as resources dwindled. Zach found himself mediating increasingly hostile disputes between neighboring ranchers. "It's only going to get worse," he told Zara one night as they lay in bed, the oppressive heat making sleep elusive. "Thatcher's threatening to dam the creek that runs through his property. If he does, 3 downstream farms lose their water." Zara traced patterns on his chest, feeling the steady thump of his heart beneath her fingers. "Can't the sheriff intervene?" Zach sighed. "Sheriff's getting too old for this. Most disputes fall to me now, and water rights are complicated legally. Thatcher might have a claim." "But morally he doesn't," Zara finished his thought. "You'll find a solution. You always do." Her faith in him was unwavering, and Zach drew strength from it during the difficult weeks that followed. When negotiations failed, he organized a community effort to dig wells that could serve multiple properties, working alongside the men until his hands were raw and blistered. Zara, meanwhile, convinced Mr. Peterson to extend credit to struggling families and organized the town's women to preserve what food was available for the coming winter. Together, they helped guide Riverspend through the crisis, emerging as natural leaders whose care for the community transcended their official roles. It was during this period that Zara discovered she was expecting their first child. The news, coming amidst such hardship, filled them both with joy tinged with anxiety. "What if I'm not ready?" Zach whispered one night, his hand resting protectively over her still flat stomach. "What if I fail you both?" Zara covered his hand with hers. "You won't. We'll face whatever comes together, just like we've faced everything else." His eyes, shadowed with memories of his past loss, searched hers. "I couldn't bear to lose you, Zara, either of you." "You won't," she promised, willing it to be true. As her pregnancy progressed and her body changed, Zach's protectiveness increased proportionally. He insisted on walking her to and from the store each day, scrutinized every meal for proper nutrition, and even much to Zara's amused exasperation, interviewed 3 different midwives before selecting one he deemed competent. "You do realize women have been having babies since the beginning of time?" She teased him after he installed a new, more comfortable chair by the fireplace without her asking. "And I intend for you to have the easiest time of it in history," he replied, completely serious. In early spring, almost exactly a year after their wedding, Zara gave birth to a healthy daughter they named Rebecca Martha Flynn, honoring both the wife Zach had lost and the aunt who had raised Zara. The difficult delivery tested both Zach's resolve and Zara's strength, but when he finally held his daughter in his trembling hands, the love that overwhelmed him washed away decades of pain. "She has your eyes," he told Zara, carefully placing the swaddled infant in her arms, "and your courage." "Let's hope she has your aim," Zara replied with tired humor. "It might come in handy if she ever encounters wolves." As Rebecca grew, so did Riverspend. The railroad that Zach had once scouted for finally arrived, bringing new opportunities and challenges to the frontier town. Zach, who had assumed full sheriff duties after the previous sheriff retired, found himself navigating the changing landscape of law enforcement as the population swelled with railway workers, merchants, and fortune seekers. Zara expanded the general store into a proper mercantile, hiring 2 assistants to help manage the increased business. Between her work and caring for Rebecca, her days were full, but she never forgot the lessons of self-reliance and preparation that her encounter with the wolves and Zach had taught her. On Rebecca's 5th birthday, Zach surprised Zara with a special gift, the deed to her aunt's old homestead, which had been abandoned after Martha's passing 2 years earlier. "I thought we might rebuild it," he explained as they rode out to the property together, Rebecca securely held before him on his horse. "Not to live in permanently, but as a place to get away. A place where Rebecca can learn about the land like you did." Zara surveyed the neglected property with mixed emotions. The cabin itself was in disrepair, but the location with its sweeping views of the plains and distant mountains still held a wild beauty that called to her. "It's where we first met," she realized suddenly. "That day with the wolves, I was coming from here." Zach nodded, his eyes crinkling at the corners in the way that still made her heart skip. "Seemed fitting that our story should continue here." Over the next year, they worked on the homestead during weekends and holidays, gradually restoring the cabin and adding a small stable. Rebecca delighted in these excursions, collecting wildflowers and learning to identify animal tracks under her father's patient tutelage. It was during one such visit, 7 years after their first meeting, that Zach and Zara found themselves sitting on the cabin's new porch at dusk, watching Rebecca chase fireflies in the yard. The evening was peaceful, the air sweet with summer grass, when a distant howl echoed across the plains. Rebecca froze, her eyes wide as she turned toward her parents. "Wolves?" Zach nodded, extending his hand to beckon her closer. "They won't bother us, they're just announcing the night." The little girl hurried to the porch, climbing into her father's lap with the unquestioning trust of a child who has never known anything but security. "Tell me the story again," she requested, settling against his chest. "About how you saved Mama from the wolves." Zach's eyes met Zara's over their daughter's head, a lifetime of shared love and adventure reflected in that single glance. "Well," he began, his deep voice rumbling comfortingly against Rebecca's ear. "It was an evening much like this one, when your Mama found herself far from safety as the sun began to set." As Zach retold their beginning, embellishing certain details for dramatic effect, while Zara interjected corrections that made Rebecca giggle, another wolf howled closer this time. But Zara felt no fear, only a profound sense of rightness. The creatures that had once threatened her life had, in an unexpected way, led her to the greatest love and the richest life she could have imagined. Later that night, after Rebecca had fallen asleep in the small room they had prepared especially for her, Zach and Zara stood together at the cabin window, looking out at the moon-silvered landscape. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't come along that evening?" Zara asked, leaning back against his chest, Zach's arms tightened around her. "I try not to, but I know I'd still be wandering, empty inside if I hadn't found you." Zara turned in his embrace, reaching up to trace the familiar contours of his face, more weathered now, but no less beloved. "Then I suppose I owe those wolves a debt of gratitude." "As do I," Zach murmured, lowering his mouth to hers. "Though I still plan to shoot in the air if they come too close to what's mine." Their laughter, soft so as not to wake their daughter, blended with the night sounds of the frontier, a harmony of civilization and wilderness that perfectly reflected the life they had built together, forged in danger but sustained by love.